The tragic night when Mia Stevan went missing. In the quiet corners of our seemingly safe world lurk shadows that parents warn their children about from their earliest years. Don't talk to strangers, they say. Never get into an unknown car. Trust your instincts. These age-old warnings passed down through generations carry wisdom born from tragedy. Yet sometimes even adults, despite knowing these rules by heart, can fall prey to those who exploit moments of vulnerability. Mia Stevan was one such story that would shake the peaceful city of Aalborg to its core. On what began as an ordinary evening, the vibrant medical student joined her friends for a party, her laughter echoing through the night, her eyes bright with dreams of the future. None of those present could have known they were witnessing her final hours among them. When dawn broke, Mia had vanished, leaving behind only questions and growing fear. The disappearance of the beloved student sent ripples through the medical school community. Posters bearing her photograph appeared on every street corner, and search parties combed the city streets. But hope would turn to horror when investigators made a discovery in the depths of a nearby forest, a finding so disturbing that it would haunt even the most hardened detectives for years to come. Born under the winter sky of January 15, 2000, Mia was the youngest jewel in the crown of a tight-knit Danish family. Aalborg, with its historic harbor and reputation for safety, had seemed the perfect place to raise a child. The port city's gentle rhythms and low crime rates had lulled its residents into a sense of security that would soon be shattered. From her earliest days, Mia showed promise that set her apart. Her mind gravitated naturally toward the sciences, particularly chemistry and biology, where she demonstrated an intuitive understanding that amazed her teachers. But it wasn't just her academic brilliance that drew people to her. It was her heart. Every achievement was balanced by an equal measure of compassion, every success tempered by humility. Nature had blessed Mia with more than just intelligence. Her striking Nordic beauty and natural grace caught the eye of modeling scouts while she was still in high school. Soon, her face graced local campaigns and fashion catalogs, though she never let this success deflect her from her true passion, medicine. To those who knew her, Mia was that rare combination of beauty and brilliance, of ambition and kindness. When she earned her place at Aalborg University's prestigious medical program, it seemed like the first step in a journey destined for greatness. She balanced her rigorous studies with continued modeling work, building a life that seemed to sparkle with promise. The words bright future followed her like a shadow until that shadow took on a darker form. Life had a comforting rhythm for Mia, even as she blazed her trail through medical school. Each evening, she would return to her family home where the scent of her mother's cooking and the warmth of family bonds remained constant anchors in her increasingly busy life. But like millions around the world, this familiar pattern was shattered when COVID-19 swept across Denmark during her second year at university. The vibrant halls of Aalborg University fell silent, and Mia's world shrank to the dimensions of a computer screen. For someone who thrived on human connection, the isolation cut deep. Video calls and social media became poor substitutes for the energy she drew from face-to-face interactions. She maintained her smile during family dinners and online classes, but those who knew her best could sense her yearning for the world beyond her screen. So when Denmark announced the lifting of all restrictions in February 2022, it felt like awakening from a long winter's sleep. February 5th, 2022, dawned with a promise that tingled in the air. Across Denmark, young people emerged from their cocoons of isolation, ready to reclaim the nightlife that COVID had stolen. For Mia, this wasn't just another Saturday night. It was a celebration of freedom, of youth, of life itself. She approached her preparation with the same meticulous attention she gave her medical studies. Her phone buzzed constantly that afternoon with messages from friends, coordinating meeting points and planning the evening's trajectory. Standing before her wardrobe mirror, Mia transformed herself for the occasion. The black dress she chose wasn't just clothing, it was armor for a warrior returning to battle, a statement of defiance against the isolation they'd all endured. Each brushstroke of makeup, each carefully placed accessory was part of a ritual of return. The milestone of completing her penultimate semester added extra sweetness to the evening's promise. She stood before her full-length mirror, a vision in black, the cropped leather jacket adding an edge to her elegance. Even the February chill couldn't dim her radiance, while she was ready to make this night memorable. If only she had known how prophetic that thought would become. The evening began with the comfortable familiarity of friends who'd known each other since before the world changed. Their designated drivers navigated the streets of Aalborg, where the contrast between the packed bars and the empty, frostbitten streets created an almost surreal atmosphere. Inside each venue, the energy was electric, fueled by youth and freedom and possibility. They started at their favorite bar, where memories of pre-pandemic nights still lingered in the air. As the hours passed, their group evolved like a living organism. The migration from one venue to another became a fluid dance, with friends peeling away while new faces joined their orbit. Each transition changed the dynamic subtly, introducing new variables into what had started as a carefully planned evening. The familiar faces that had accompanied Mia at the beginning of the night gradually gave way to new ones, a detail that would later haunt those who loved her. The night pulsed with renewed freedom as faces came and went, each hour bringing new connections in the intoxicating atmosphere of reunion. Through it all, Mia remained the bright center of attention, her laughter carrying across the music as she danced and socialized. Witnesses would later recall her measured approach to drinking, present enough to feel the joy of the moment, but clear-headed enough to maintain her characteristic grace. By 3 a.m., as the night began its slow descent toward dawn, Mia's original companions felt the pull of home. She waved off their concerns with the confidence of youth, assuring them she'd make her own way back later. Perhaps if they had stayed, they would have noticed the unfamiliar man who had begun gravitating toward her, his attention focused with an intensity that would later haunt their memories. The harsh reality of February in Denmark reasserted itself at 6 a.m. when the club finally closed its doors. The vibrant crowd had dwindled to a trickle, leaving Mia with just one remaining friend. They stepped out into a world transformed. The streets of Aalborg lay empty and silent, the wind cutting through their party clothes like a knife of ice. Standing there, they made what seemed like a sensible decision to catch their respective buses home. Neither could have known that their casual goodbye would be the last time anyone would see Mia alive. The first tendrils of worry began to creep into the Stevan household when morning arrived without Mia. Her parents initially pushed aside their concern. After all, she had many friends she might have stayed with, but there was something about her silent phone, its calls going straight to voicemail, that sent a chill through her mother's heart. It was so unlike Mia, who always kept in touch, always answered, always let them know she was safe. By noon on February 6th, that nagging worry had bloomed into full-blown fear. Mia's mother, her hands trembling slightly, began the ritual that no parent ever wants to perform, calling her daughter's friends one by one, each conversation increasing the weight in her stomach. The responses formed a terrifying pattern. No one had seen her, no one had heard from her, and no one could reach her. The Stevens broke another cardinal rule that day, waiting 24 hours to report a missing adult. They rushed to the police station, their hearts in their throats, praying the authorities would take immediate action. Perhaps it was the desperation in their voices, or maybe the officers sensed something wasn't right. But the investigation began at once. Detectives moved swiftly, piecing together Mia's last known movements through interviews with friends and witnesses. The investigation quickly painted a picture of that final night. Mia, radiant in her black dress and light jacket, moving through the crowded venues with her characteristic confidence. But as investigators pored over security footage from the bars and clubs, they faced a frustrating reality. The cameras that should have helped track Mia's movements instead revealed only a blur of bodies, the crushing crowd obscuring crucial details that might have led them to answers. The security footage painted a deceptively innocent picture. Mia, seemingly carefree, declining rides home from concerned friends. But seasoned detectives knew that evil often hid in such ordinary moments. Their attention quickly focused on the mysterious dance partner who had shadowed Mia's movements that night. The investigation caught a break when he was identified as a fellow university student and promising athlete, someone whose presence should have been reassuring rather than ominous. His cooperation seemed complete, his alibi airtight. The taxi driver's confirmation of dropping him off across town at 5 a.m. should have been reassuring, yet something about the case continued to needle at the investigators' instincts. They turned their attention to Mia's background, searching for hidden threats or enemies, but found only more questions. Her life was an open book. No substance abuse, no criminal connections, no mental health struggles. Even the possibility of a stalker led nowhere, with friends and family drawing blank after blank. The breakthrough came in the grainy images of street surveillance cameras. Frame by frame, they tracked Mia's final known movements: the farewell to her last remaining friend, a brief 300-foot walk together, then the fateful parting of ways. But it was what lurked in the background that caught the detectives' trained eyes. A dark vehicle, moving like a shadow, keeping pace with Mia's solitary figure. The next 500 feet of footage told a story of increasing vulnerability. Mia, elegant but underdressed for the bitter cold, waiting at a bus stop that would never see its scheduled arrival. The early Sunday morning schedule, still disrupted by lingering pandemic restrictions, had betrayed her. In a cruel twist of fate, her phone had died earlier in the night, leaving her cut off from any possibility of help. The darkness of 6 a.m. enveloped her like a shroud as she stood shivering, her black dress offering little protection against the Danish winter. Then came the moment that would haunt investigators. At 6:15 a.m., a black Volkswagen Golf glided into frame. The driver's interaction with Mia was brief: an offered ride, a refusal, then departure. But something about this exchange would later prove crucial to the investigation. For over an hour, surveillance cameras captured Mia's increasingly desperate wait. The once vibrant medical student who had started the evening celebrating renewed freedom now stood trapped by circumstance, alone, cold, and increasingly vulnerable in a city that suddenly seemed much less safe than she had always believed. The investigation briefly expanded to include Adam, but his alibi proved unshakable. Family visits in another town, confirmed by multiple witnesses, placed him far from Aalborg on the night in question. With Adam eliminated as a suspect, all focus turned to Thompson, and investigators began the meticulous work of unraveling his past. Thomas Thompson's story began in Kolding, June 1985, where he entered the world into what appeared to be an ordinary working-class family. But something in his teenage years had prompted his parents to send him away, a decision that would later interest investigators. The southeastern countryside farm owned by his grandparents became his new home, a detail that would prove significant as the investigation deepened. Thomas Thompson's life read like a study in contrasts. His military career gleamed with accomplishment, from recruit to sergeant, serving in conflict zones that would leave their mark on any soul. The transition to civilian life appeared smooth: an engineering degree, a respectable job, a life rebuilt. But beneath this carefully constructed facade lurked something far darker. His colleagues at the industrial firm painted a portrait of professional competence wrapped in deliberate distance. Thompson excelled at his work while maintaining an invisible wall between himself and others. He was the ghost in the office, present yet perpetually absent, skilled yet unreachable. This studied isolation might have seemed merely eccentric, if not for the violent shadows in his past. The evidence of his darker nature lay scattered through police reports and court documents, a trail of domestic violence allegations that never quite reached conviction. His former partner's testimonies formed a chilling pattern: a man whose rage erupted like a volcano, leaving terror in its wake. Their descriptions painted a portrait of someone walking a knife's edge between control and chaos. Most disturbing were their warnings, predictions that his escalating violence would eventually lead to something unthinkable. As investigators delved deeper into Thompson's history, a crucial question emerged. Had they found the man who took Mia, or merely another troubled veteran with anger management issues? Thompson himself offered no answers, his military training perhaps serving him well in maintaining his silence. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Thompson's own car betrayed him. His attempt to disable the vehicle's GPS system at 2 a.m. on February 6th backfired spectacularly, creating instead a detailed digital breadcrumb trail. Every 30 seconds, the malfunctioning system dutifully recorded his movements, telling a story that chilled investigators to the bone. The GPS data revealed a predator's pattern. Leaving home at 2:45 a.m., Thompson spent hours prowling the streets of Aalborg, his path suggesting a methodical search for prey. His first contact with Mia at 6 a.m. appeared calculated, testing her vulnerability, gauging her resistance. When she refused his initial offer, he didn't give up. Instead, he continued his patrol of the city streets, perhaps knowing that time and cold would wear down her defenses. When he returned at 7:30 a.m., the GPS confirmed what the cameras had shown. Mia's final moments of freedom, her reluctant entry into his vehicle. Then came the most disturbing part of the digital trail, the car's journey away from the safety of the city, through drowsy towns, and into the isolation of the woods. Each brief stop marked on the GPS data represented a moment of terror that investigators had yet to fully understand. The forest began yielding its secrets piece by piece. First came the heartbreaking trail of evidence, strands of long hair caught like memories in the branches, torn fragments of clothing marking a desperate flight through the darkness. The scene told a story of primal terror. A young woman running for her life through unfamiliar woods, her pursuer close behind, every snagged branch and stumble bringing him closer. The search dog's behavior changed dramatically several hundred feet into the forest, their agitation leading investigators to areas of freshly disturbed earth. What lay 3 feet beneath the soil would shake even veteran detectives to their core. Human remains methodically dismembered into 231 distinct pieces, some scattered nearby as if in mockery of human dignity. Only DNA testing could confirm what Hartz already knew. They had found Mia. The media's hunger for details forced law enforcement's hand. They moved quickly to reassure a terrified public, confirming the perpetrator was in custody while withholding the most haunting details. Behind the scenes, forensic specialists pieced together a nightmare methodology: the clinical precision of a power saw, the calculated use of chemical solutions to destroy evidence, all suggesting a mind both methodical and monstrous. Through painstaking examination, medical examiners extracted the truth from Mia's remains. The tale they pieced together spoke of mechanical asphyxiation, not the intimate brutality of bare hands, but the cold efficiency of a rope or strap. Meanwhile, Thompson's vehicle betrayed him despite his attempts at concealment. Blood traces, partially cleaned but still detectable, carried Mia's genetic signature. His bathroom, transformed into a makeshift chamber of horrors, held similar damning evidence. When confronted, Thompson's facade began to crack. His initial explanation emerged as a carefully constructed narrative, attempting to paint himself as a good Samaritan caught in unfortunate circumstances. He spun a tale of police corruption and stalking to explain his disabled GPS, offered details of a chance encounter with a freezing woman that rang hollow against the evidence. His version of events continued to unspool like a dark fairy tale inverted: the intoxicated damsel, the flirtatious gratitude, the consensual encounter in a secluded spot. Each word seemed calculated to transform his predatory hunt into an ordinary night's misadventure. But the evidence told a different story, one of premeditation, pursuit, and unthinkable violence. Thompson's final confession emerged, but like everything else about him, it was layered in deception. He painted a picture of tragic accident. Mia, he claimed, had simply pulled the car door handle at the wrong moment, tumbling out onto the frozen ground where she broke her neck instantly. In his telling, panic drove him to the unthinkable, disposing of her body rather than facing the authorities. But like many lies, this one unraveled quickly under scrutiny. The detectives saw through the holes in his story immediately. The evidence scattered through the forest, personal items, and strands of Mia's hair, told a different, more violent tale. Under their relentless questioning, Thompson's carefully constructed narrative began to crack. He spun a new version. Mia had sobered up, he said, becoming hostile and threatening to report him for aggressive behavior. In this retelling, she fled into the darkness of the woods, with him in pursuit, supposedly concerned for her safety in the freezing night. The chase, he claimed, ended with her fatal stumble. But what followed revealed the true horror of Thompson's actions. In his bathroom, he methodically dismembered her body, attempting to erase his crime through chemicals. The failure of the remains to dissolve led to his desperate Plan B, burying the evidence deep in the forest soil. Throughout his confession, Thompson clung to his portrayal of an innocent man driven by fear and panic, desperately trying to hide an accident rather than a calculated murder. The discovery of the makeshift burn pit behind his house told the real story. Beneath layers of soil and debris lay the charred remnants of his attempted cover-up: blood-stained clothing, car floor mats, and Mia's personal belongings. Her purse, remarkably preserved, provided the crucial evidence. Its strap, stained with her blood and bearing traces of her skin cells, was identified as the murder weapon. This seemingly innocuous accessory had become the instrument of her death. The prosecution's case painted a much darker picture than Thompson's claims of panic and accident. They revealed a calculated predator who had disabled his car's GPS system before the attack, suggesting premeditation. This wasn't a story of tragic circumstance. It was a carefully planned hunt with Thompson as the hunter and Mia as his unsuspecting prey. In Mia, Thompson found what predators seek: vulnerability and isolation. The bitter cold and her desperate situation made her an ideal target. Though she initially showed sound judgment in refusing his offer, her growing desperation eventually overcame her instincts when he circled back. Like many predators, Thompson knew patience would work in his favor. The brutality of what followed revealed his true nature. The evidence painted a chilling sequence. Thompson likely threatened her at weapon point, driving her deep into the forest darkness. Mia's attempted escape through the woods spoke of her fierce will to live, but Thompson hunted her down. In a final cruel twist, he used her own purse strap to end her life, transforming an everyday accessory into a weapon of murder before methodically dismembering her body in his home. But perhaps most disturbing was Thompson's behavior in the aftermath. As Mia's remains lay in his bathroom, he lived as if nothing had happened, ordering pizza twice, buying candy, and maintaining a facade of normalcy that chilled his neighbors. In retrospect, he smiled, chatted, and went about his day while evidence of his brutality dissolved in chemicals mere feet away. This wasn't the behavior of someone racked by panic or remorse. It was the calculated performance of a predator hiding in plain sight. The investigation unearthed Thompson's darker history, a pattern of voyeurism that had gone unchecked. Multiple women had reported him peeping through their windows, photographing them in private moments, yet their complaints gathered dust. This failure of the system to act on these red flags would later haunt the community, as these warning signs could have prevented Mia's fate. The chemical bath that destroyed crucial DNA evidence proved to be Thompson's final act of manipulation, allowing him to maintain his claim of consensual encounter. Despite the overwhelming circumstantial evidence, this destruction of proof would play a role in what many saw as an unconscionable legal outcome. In June 2023, justice seemed to arrive when Thompson was convicted of premeditated homicide and corpse desecration. Yet the sentence, life imprisonment with possibility of parole after just 10 years, struck many as a mockery of justice. The system that had failed to stop him as a voyeur now seemed poised to fail again, offering him a path back to freedom despite his horrific crimes. The possibility of his release after just a decade stands as a stark reminder that sometimes the law's definition of justice falls tragically short of what humanity demands.